The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Well, welcome back to segment 2 of True News. I'm Rick Wiles. From the beginning of Barack Obama's campaign for president in 2007, this radio news program has been in the forefront of investigating the mysterious past of Barack Hussein Obama. For 6 years, we have reported facts and interviewed guests that have raised troubling questions about Mr. Obama's true identity, his past association with known communists and extremists, the influence of radical Marxist communists on his thinking, and the long list of questionable identity documents. Amazingly, the national news media has done a superb job in making sure the general public doesn't hear any of these facts. As you know, Maricopa County, Arizona Sheriff Joe Arpaio assembled a cold case posse to look into the authenticity of President Obama's long-form birth certificate. Sheriff Arpaio said the evidence indicates forgery. Once again, the national news media went into overdrive to make sure the findings were covered up. The team was led by Detective Michael Zollo, and he's on the telephone right now to tell us what his team uncovered. Detective Zollo, welcome to True News.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, our audience, I will tell you, Mr. Zollo, this radio audience is well informed about a lot of these questionable things about Mr. Obama. We have been on this case year after year, interviewing a lot of people who would qualify as expert witnesses in a criminal trial or a civil lawsuit. And, we've been frustrated by the lack of attention from the news media or from government officials with the evidence that we have uncovered. Sheriff Arpaio, who's been a guest on this program over the years, I know he began to look at started out with looking at the long form birth certificate that Mr. Obama posted on the official White House website. Tell us how this investigation started at the sheriff's office and what you found and what it led to.
Well, back in about September, I believe it was, of 2011, Sheriff Arpaio was approached by some surprise Arizona Tea Party members that had with them petitions signed by 250 citizens who expressed concern over the purported birth document released by Mr. Obama during a press conference alleging that he was born in the state of Hawaii and therefore would be a citizen of the United States of America. They were concerned that their voting rights were going to be infringed upon because they didn't believe the document to be authentic. Apparently, when the document was posted on a government website, people in the know in how to manipulate graphic programs realized almost immediately that there was something wrong with this document. It looked like it was manufactured. The sheriff really didn't know much about this topic, other than what you would have heard in a news snippet somewhere. And he really didn't want to be put in a position to use taxpayer money to go on basically a fishing expedition. The sheriff in Maricopa County, Sheriff Arpaio, has at his disposal a volunteer posse, 3,000 members of the citizenry that at any time under state constitution and state statute he can call upon to assist him in whatever endeavor he deems necessary. The cold case posse was formed about 7 years ago. He asked me to head that up for him, and it's comprised of members with formal law enforcement experience and training behind them, investigational experience and training. We have lawyers, litigators, defense attorneys that work in this one particular area with us. And he asked me if I would be willing to have our group take a look at this for him. But your listeners should be aware that the sheriff in the very beginning conversations with me asked me straight out if I had a bias towards this. And I told him I didn't, because I didn't have anything. I really was never really focused on this issue. The sheriff also said to me that he wanted to clear the document and move the country forward because he didn't think himself it was going to be a major issue. That being said, about 4 weeks after that, I finally arranged for Jerome Corsi, an avid writer on this topic, who was offered up to us as source of information to come into Phoenix, and I had personally interviewed him along with 4 other members of our team for 16 hours. And around the 14th hour of that 2-day interview, I really wasn't buying a lot of this. I mean, there was things that were interesting, but there were parts of it I just, chalked off to being computer-generated items. It wasn't until about that 14th hour that Mr. Corsi showed me the way the state registrar stamp is able to be picked up and moved about the document. And aside from that, it leaves a white halo behind it. In other words, you could pick the ink portion up of it, move it up to the top of the document, but there's a white halo that stays behind it, and that really caught my attention. And looking at that, I immediately recognized the legal significance of that. If the very embossed print of a state registrar stamp certifying the document authentic looks to be placed on the document erroneously, then the document in and of itself has no legal value. The document, in fact, would be a fraudulent document. That's what started this, and I had to go back to the sheriff and tell him that we had a problem, that we had a fraudulent document on our hands, and there's a fraud that's been committed against the people of Maricopa County. And when you commit that fraud against the people of Maricopa County, you then commit it against the 14 other counties making up the state of Arizona. And when you fraud the state, now you don't only fraud one state, you fraud all 50. And you've got a nationwide problem here. And that put me on now going into almost the 11th month of investigating this document. It's been... Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Zola, as a police investigator, law enforcement investigator, if the man in question was not Barack Obama, but it was just Tom Smith, Joe Blow, all right, and you were approached and you said, we think this man has presented fraudulent identity documents. Now, everybody in this country knows that the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office is in the forefront of dealing with illegal immigration, problems like that, drug dealers, and all kinds of serious crime. But if you were approached by someone who, say, a district attorney, somebody said, look, we've got questions about this guy. We don't think these documents are legit. And you started to look at these documents, and you started to see that the state seal was not real, that somebody had manipulated these things. As a police officer, what would that trigger inside you? What actions would start to be taken inside a law enforcement office?
Well, depending on what the document was used for, and assuming it was used for something critical and made a representation of, you would open up a file and start an investigation, starting with the individual that presented it and whose name appears on the document. Now, the problem that you have with this particular case is, as with any case of identity theft, if you will, sometimes the person whose identity has been stolen doesn't know it's been stolen or doesn't know it's been tampered with. In the case of Mr. Obama, going back and looking at the way the press conference producing this document was orchestrated, it was done in such a fashion that Mr. Obama has plausible deniability all the way around. He never took possession of the document. According to the reports and according to a law firm, Perkins Coie, they picked the document up for him on his behalf. There's no indication that he ever held the document. There's no indication that he even knows what was contained in the envelope holding the document. Now, that's not to say he doesn't know. It's just to say there's no evidence stating that he does. So you have a situation here where the purported owner of the document has a defense saying, I didn't know, I was told, and I was told by counsel. And this came out of the state of Hawaii, that's what I was told. That becomes a problem. But the bigger problem with this particular document, and going back to the question that you asked, it wouldn't matter really who held the document. The fact is, this is a state-issued document. And I hate to call this computer-generated file a document because it's not. It's a computer-generated image. It lives in cyberspace. It was created inside the mind of a computer. But the only persons that would have the authority to make a birth certificate from the state of Hawaii would in fact be the state of Hawaii. And we have no indication, even after I interviewed an attorney general from the state of Hawaii, that the state of Hawaii in fact made that electronic file. That's a crime. No one has the right. It's no different than making a driver's license. Only the state issuing the driver's license has authority to make a driver's license. If somebody else makes a driver's license, even though it could look perfect, and even though it represents the truth, it's a fraudulent document. And that's what we're trying to say. This document cannot be relied on. And during the course of an investigation, we discovered statutes within Hawaii's law that come right out and tell you that their birth certificate information is only as good as prima facie evidence. Prima facie evidence is the lowest form of evidence you can get in any proceeding. Prima facie evidence means it's evidence to be taken at first blush or first glance, but requires further investigation to prove validation. They're telling you, we don't investigate the facts, we're just reporting information. So that becomes a problem to us, because there's been no vetting of that information. We don't know how the information got into the file. Now, everybody has been saying, well, he's been in the newspapers being born in 1961. Therefore, that's evidence that he was born there. And I can tell you that that is not evidence that he was born there. We found in the statutes of Hawaii that there were provisions that individuals could have reported a birth alleging someone to be born in the state of Hawaii. In fact, they never were. And that was abused in the late 50s and early 60s as a very common practice. The state of Hawaii, though, would accept those representations, and they would do it for monetary reasons, because they would get federal aid for an increase in populace. And we have evidence that shows that the birth rate in Hawaii exponentially increased over those years once they became a state. And it was done for monetary purpose. It's so out of sync with the rest of the nation that it's almost laughable. We also know through statute, through our investigation in the state of Hawaii, that they have the ability to amend a birth certificate at any time. And literally the recipient, the person whose name is on the document, is the registrant. He can come in, or she can come in at any time over the course of their life, produce an affidavit or some other kind of official proof that something changed on their birth certificate or their birth event, and they can have that document amended and reflect those changes. They could actually go in, and I have documents from other individuals that have gone in and changed the name of the natural birth father to the adopted father on a birth certificate.
But what happened to the when that takes place? What happens to the original document?
The original document, then, according to what we understand in their procedure, is sealed, along with the information amending the document. Here is the trick, and here's why we believe the electronic file may have been created, because you're always asking the question, why would someone do something? We believe that Mr. Obama's birth certificate, if I can tell you, there was a birth announcement, there was a registry line item of a birth of a Barack Hussein Obama. That did happen in 1961. However, that doesn't mean he was born here. And we have evidence to show that a lot of Japanese citizens were placed in that same registry and were never born here, but reported as being born in Hawaii. We know that occurred. But when it came time to look for the document, the governor of the state, Abercrombie, could not find the document. As a matter of fact, he's telling people it didn't exist. And they had to create a document. And here's what would have probably happened.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.